Hello to everyone across Africa and to everyone who believes this continent deserves the right to control its own future. There are moments in history when a nation does not simply face a crisis, it faces a decision that could reshape the future of an entire region. And today, that moment may be unfolding across the Sahel, just months after Mali began rewriting its mining laws, pushing out foreign military influence, and tightening control over its gold and lithium reserves. Another question is beginning to spread across Africa. Could Burkina Faso and Niger become the next targets in a growing struggle over resources, sovereignty, and power? Because what is happening in the Sahel is no longer just about terrorism or political instability. It is about uranium, it is about gold, it is about lithium, and more importantly, it is about who gets to control them. Across Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, new governments are trying to challenge an old system that many Africans believe kept the region dependent for decades. A system where foreign companies extracted wealth while insecurity continued to grow. And in geopolitics, no crisis ever appears by accident. The deeper question is this: what happens when African governments stop accepting the old contracts and start demanding control over their own strategic resources? In this video, we are going to break down how Mali changed the rules of the game, why Burkina Faso and Niger may now face growing pressure, and why the rise of the AES alliance could become one of the most important geopolitical shifts in modern African history. Follow this channel if you want to understand Africa from the perspective of Africa itself. Mali did not just change a mining law. Mali challenged an entire system of power that had shaped the Sahel for decades. In 2023, the Malian government introduced a new mining code designed to increase state control over strategic resources. Under the new rules, the government gained the ability to take larger ownership stakes in mining projects involving gold and lithium. For many Africans, this was more than an economic reform. It was a declaration that Mali wanted a greater share of the wealth coming from its own soil. And the timing was not accidental. At the same moment, Mali was rewriting mining contracts. It was also reducing French military influence, strengthening ties with new security partners, and building the alliance of Sahel states alongside Burkina Faso and Niger. To supporters of the government, this was the beginning of a model where African states could defend themselves, control their resources, and negotiate with foreign powers on different terms. But to many Western governments and international companies, Mali's direction raised serious concerns. Because Mali is not a small player in the global resource market. The country holds major gold reserves and one of Africa's most important lithium projects at Gulamina. Lithium is now one of the most valuable strategic minerals in the world because it powers electric vehicle batteries and modern energy systems. That means the battle over Mali is no longer only about security, it is also about the future of global supply chains and strategic influence. For decades, Africa exported enormous mineral wealth while importing instability, military dependence, and economic pressure Mali's leaders are now trying to reverse that pattern. And that is exactly why what happens in Mali matters far beyond Mali itself. Because once one country begins rewriting the rules around resources and sovereignty, others may decide to follow. Burkina Faso and Niger are now standing at the center of the same storm that transformed Mali. In Burkina Faso, Captain Ibrahim Traore has become one of the most talked about leaders in Africa. To many young Africans, he represents a new generation that is openly challenging foreign influence and demanding greater control over national wealth. Burkina Faso is one of Africa's major gold producers. Yet, despite years of extraction, security and poverty have continued to spread across large parts of the country. That contradiction has become central to Traore's message. His government has moved to increase state influence in the gold sector while deepening cooperation with Mali and Niger through the AES alliance. Supporters see this as an attempt to break away from the old system where African resources left the continent while instability remained behind. Niger faces an even more sensitive situation because of uranium. For decades, Niger supplied uranium that helped power French nuclear energy, yet many citizens inside Niger continued living with severe poverty and weak infrastructure. After the 2023 coup, the new leadership began distancing itself from France, demanding greater sovereignty and stronger control over strategic resources. That shift immediately raised geopolitical tensions. Because uranium is not just another mineral, it is tied to energy security, global influence, and the balance of power between nations. And this is where the danger grows. Modern resource wars do not always begin with foreign invasions. Sometimes they begin with economic pressure, sometimes with diplomatic isolation, sometimes with media campaigns, and sometimes with armed instability inside already fragile regions. The Sahel remains vulnerable to terrorism, border insecurity, smuggling networks, and political unrest. Those problems are real, but when countries rich in gold, lithium, and uranium begin rejecting the old geopolitical order, every internal weakness can quickly become part of a much larger international struggle. That is why many Africans are beginning to ask a difficult question. If Mali became the first battlefield in the fight for resource sovereignty, could Burkina Faso and Niger become the next? What is emerging across the Sahel today is larger than any single government or military alliance. The Alliance of Sahel States, known as AES, is slowly transforming from a security pact into something much bigger. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are no longer speaking only about fighting terrorism. They are speaking about sovereignty, control over resources, and independence from external pressure. And that shift is changing the geopolitical landscape of Africa. Assimi Goïta in Mali, Ibrahim Traore in Burkina Faso, and Abdurrahmane Tiani in Niger have become symbols of a new political direction in the Sahel. Despite their differences, they share one core message. African states should control African resources. That message has gained enormous support among many young Africans who are frustrated after decades of instability, foreign military presence, and economic inequality. Across social media, the AES alliance is increasingly presented as a sign that Africa is beginning to stand up for itself. But this growing influence also creates fear outside the region, because if the AES model succeeds, other African countries rich in strategic minerals may begin demanding new contracts, stronger state control, and less foreign influence. Countries with cobalt, uranium, oil, gas, and rare earth minerals could start asking the same question, now spreading across the Sahel. Who truly benefits from Africa's wealth? At the same time, the situation remains extremely dangerous. Violence has not disappeared from the Sahel. Armed groups continue operating across borders. Economic conditions remain difficult. Critics also warn that military governments can become too centralized and restrict political freedoms in the name of national security. These concerns are real and cannot be ignored. But supporters of AES argue that the old system failed to bring either stability or prosperity. They believe Africa cannot continue exporting strategic resources while remaining dependent on foreign security structures. And that is why the struggle in the Sahel matters far beyond West Africa. This is not just a conflict over territory, it is a battle over who gets to define Africa's future, control its resources, and shape the next era of global power. What happens next in the Sahel could shape the future of Africa for decades to come. Because this is no longer only about Mali, Burkina Faso, or Niger. It is about whether African nations can truly control their own resources, security, and political direction in a world still shaped by global power competition. If the AES alliance succeeds, it could inspire other African countries to demand stronger ownership over gold, uranium, lithium, oil, and strategic minerals. It could encourage governments across the continent to renegotiate contracts, reduce dependency, and build new regional alliances. But if the alliance fails, the consequences could be devastating. The Sahel could sink deeper into instability, proxy conflicts, economic isolation, and endless cycles of violence. And many Africans fear that outside powers would once again shape the future of the region from afar, while ordinary people continue paying the price. That is why the world is watching the Sahel so closely, because the real question is no longer whether Africa has resources. The real question is who will control the systems built around those resources in the years ahead. Across Africa, a new generation is beginning to challenge old assumptions about power, sovereignty, and dependence. Whether that movement succeeds or fails may define the next chapter of the continent's history. In the coming months, attention will remain fixed on Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, not simply to watch another regional crisis unfold, but to see whether a different political and economic model can survive under intense international pressure. Follow this channel if you want to understand Africa from the perspective of Africa itself, because in the next video, we will go deeper into the hidden battle over strategic minerals, foreign influence, and the growing geopolitical competition shaping the future of the African continent. History does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to those who understand the rules of power.